Hello, Redeemer. Today we're going to look at one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. It's a story that shows the great mercy of a great God. It's the story of Nathan confronting David. Now we find this story in the 12th chapter of the 2nd Samuel. A little background, if you remember, David had an affair with Bathsheba. She became pregnant, and he tried to cover it up. And in the process of covering it up, he goes as far as having her husband killed on the battle lines so he could marry her. David's in a mess at this point, but in his mind, he's got it all covered up. The first verse in chapter 12 says, "The Lord sent Nathan to David." How about that for an assignment? This could not have been an easy assignment for Nathan. He was going to confront the most powerful man in Israel who had just had someone killed. But the Lord was pursuing David, and Nathan was his voice. So Nathan approaches David and tells him a story. It's a simple story of a poor man's lamb that was stolen. But David gets sucked into Nathan's story. And in verse 5 it says, David's anger was greatly kindled against that man over a stolen lamb. David had a disconnect about what was right and what was wrong. He was so mad at this man stealing a little lamb in a made-up story. And then Nathan brought the punchline home. He says, "You're that man." David had heaped sin after sin after sin upon himself and tried to bury it as far as he could. He kept shoving it down and ignoring the guilt, ignoring the promptings of the Spirit. He thought he was good to go, but the Lord wasn't going to let him go. The Lord pursued David. He pursued him through the prophet Nathan. David had to face the reality of his sin. I love how David responds because it shows he's really going on in his heart. He said, "I have sinned against the Lord." I have sinned against the Lord. David made a mess and had sinned against many people through this whole situation. But he knew that first and foremost, he had sinned against the Lord. And that's what he needed to, that's where he needed to begin. And this is where we see the great mercy of God. Verse 13, "And Nathan said to David, 'The Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die.'" You see, David deserved to die, and the Lord showed him mercy. You know, 1 John 1:9 says, "If we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sin and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness." David confessed his sin, and the Lord forgave him. You know, we can point fingers at David all the time because we see his failures, but the Bible tells us that David is not alone in this. All of us have sinned. We all find ourselves in David's shoes, sometimes piling it up, trying to ignore it, hoping it goes away. The Lord cannot allow sin to exist. He hates it, and each of us must face it. We, like David, must acknowledge that we have sinned against the Lord. First and foremost, it is His standard that we have broken, and we deserve to die. But there's hope. Just like David, if we confess our sin, He's faithful and just to forgive. Don't cover up sin. Don't pile sin on top of sin. Confess it. Bring it to the light and find forgiveness in Jesus Christ. Redeemer Church, you are loved.